out to the Lord his God and said, Lord, it is nothing for you to help, whether you with many or with those who have no power, help us. O Lord your God, for we rest on you, and in your name we go against this multitude, O Lord. You are our God. Do not let man prevail against you. We'll conclude our reading at this point, the book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 14, verse 11. You've been listening to a serialized reading of the Bible, the King James Version, with episodes presented each morning at 8:15 on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Your reader has been Barbara. Thank you for listening.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Chuck Stevens, and for the next half hour, I'll be reading from the July 8th issue of the Challenger Community News, right here on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our first article, Democrats demand that Trump, quote, sign the damn bill. 21st Century Road to Housing Act would help make home ownership more affordable, lower the cost of rent, and address other housing barriers. President Trump left Capitol Hill in a state of anger and confusion on Wednesday after abruptly refusing to sign a bipartisan housing bill that would help make home ownership more affordable, lower the cost of rent, and address other housing barriers, most especially for Black Americans. Sign the damn bill, said U.S. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, a lead sponsor of the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, at a press conference on Capitol Hill, alongside more than a dozen congressional Democrats, to condemn Trump's sudden reversal on signing the most comprehensive housing legislation in more than 30 years. Later that day, in her congressional office, Waters said that she was disappointed and angry when she learned that Trump would reverse course and has reversed course on signing a bill she had worked so hard to pass in Congress alongside U.S. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Tim Scott. However, Waters explained, I felt this was a typical thing of the president in the way that he's been doing business as a president. The ranking member and former chairwoman of the House Financial Services added, he cannot be depended on. He changes his mind often, and he feels that he's not responsible for his actions, that he can do whatever he wants to do. Earlier that day, Trump announced on Truth Social that his initially scheduled bill signing at the U.S. Capitol was canceled as he demanded that Congress pass the Save America Act instead. The president said the housing bill is of minor importance compared to the SAVE Act, which would require voters to have an ID and a matching birth certificate that proves their citizenship. Experts say it will make it harder to vote for Black people, women, and other marginalized groups, thereby significantly reducing the number of people who vote in U.S. elections. Trump referred to a bipartisan housing bill as a yawn on Monday, arguing that the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or SAVE America Act, is more important. Democrats lambasted Trump for prioritizing a controversial, partisan bill over legislation that would help millions of Americans across the country afford housing amid a rising affordability crisis. The housing bill would block large investors from buying up single-family homes and create pilot programs to expand access to smaller dollar mortgages, less than $100,000, in addition to improving fairness within the appraisal industry. Read the articles by Kennethan Gaynor on the Griot. Track the bill's legislative progress and roll calls on congress.gov bill information page. Under the Constitution, a bill automatically becomes law if the president neither signs nor vetoes it within 10 days while Congress is in session, which could result in the housing package passing without his signature. Our next article, Freedom Walk, Harriet Tubman statue coming to the corridor. In case you missed the news, a traveling statue of Harriet Tubman has been retracing the path many African Americans took to escape enslavement, and it's coming to the historic Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. The statue, The Journey to Freedom by artist Wesley Wolford, is part of Freedom Walk 2026. It's an 8-week event in which participants retrace the Underground Railroad route to freedom used by the heroic individuals who fled state-sponsored slavery. The Tubman statue, which shows the fierce abolitionists on a harrowing rescue mission, represents America's struggle to live up to its promise of freedom. Currently in Niagara Falls, it will be celebrated in the historic corridor on June 28th at 2 p.m. and June 30th from 3:30 to 4:30 p.m. It will be proudly displayed on the Freedom Path behind the Nash House Museum and the historic Michigan Street Baptist Church. Freedom Walk 2026 will cross into Canada on July 1st. This news comes after Kathy Hochul signed legislation during the Juneteenth celebration in Buffalo to officially add the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Byway into the New York State Scenic Byway system. The byway will begin in the city of Auburn and Cayuga County, continuing from Seneca County through Ontario, Wayne, Monroe, Orleans, Niagara, and Erie counties before reaching its western terminus in Niagara Falls in Niagara. The State Department of Transportation, which has been working with the Underground Railroad Consortium of New York State for a number of years to develop a corridor management plan, will soon begin installing signage marking the route connecting Underground Railroad landmarks from central through western New York. There is no state in the nation with a larger Underground Railroad footprint than the Empire State, and this legislation will highlight a network of important sites along a newly created byway honoring the legacy of the Underground Railroad and one of the fiercest freedom fighters in American history, Harriet Tubman, who ultimately called New York her home, Governor Hochul said. Generations ago, the Underground Railroad carved a path through a divided continent and enabled thousands of enslaved people to gain their freedom. Through the creation of this new scenic byway, we honor the legacy of the men and women who made this dangerous journey, paving the way for a new birth of freedom for our millions of African Americans. On the 50th anniversary of Buffalo's Juneteenth celebration, there could not be a more fitting time to sign the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Byway into law, said State Senator April Baskin. I thank Governor Hochul for her support of this legislation, Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes for sponsoring this bill in the Assembly, and Saladin Allah and Lily Wiley Upshaw, two Western New York leaders in African American history preservation, whose years of advocacy helped make this designation possible. As we approach the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, it's important to remember and to celebrate people who exemplify the ideals this nation was founded on, said Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. Harriet Tubman, without a doubt, is one of those people. Next up, the Ujima Theater Company presents Yalla Bitch, a celebration of the life, love, and legacy of Lorna C. Hill, with touring production and a gala event. Touring production kicks it off through July 12th. Ujima Theater Company is honored to present Yalla Bitch this summer, a bold and deeply personal work celebrating the life and legacy of founder Lorna C. Hill. Originally performed as part of the first International Women's Playwrights Conference in 1986, Yalla Bitch began as a book of poetry of the same name. The final edition was designed, produced, and published by Lorna Hill herself, reflecting the hands-on artistry and vision that defined all of her work. Yalla journeys through Laura's life, from childhood to womanhood, from becoming a mother to navigating love. Through poetry, memory, dance, and powerful storytelling, Yalla offers an intimate portrait of a woman who lived fully, loved deeply, and created fiercely. Directed by Tioga Simpson, the production transforms those personal reflections into a moving, theatrical experience that honors womanhood and vulnerability. It is at once fierce and tender, personal and universal. Newly added original music by Curtis Lovell, Lorna's son, brings another deeply personal layer to the production, weaving family legacy and contemporary artistry. In a major milestone for the company, Ujima Theater Company will also tour Yalla Bitch, making the first time in many years that the company has taken a production beyond her main stage. Select performances will take place in gardens and lush outdoor spaces inspired by Lorna's love of gardening. With Yalla Bitch, Ujima not only celebrates its founder, but carries her voice, vision, and spirit to new audiences. Yalla Bitch is a love letter. Working on this piece has felt like being in conversation with Lorna. Her humor, her fire, her honesty, and her refusal to do anything less than herself. This production carries her breath in it, and I have tried to honor that in every choice we've made. That quote from Tioga Simpson, the director. The touring schedule includes July 6 at the Saul Elkin Stage at Shakespeare in Delaware Park at 6 p.m., 199 Lincoln Parkway in Buffalo. It's a free community performance. July 10th, Penn-Dixie Fossil Park at 6, 4050 North Street, Blaisdell, New York. That is a paid ticketed location. July 11th at Freedom Park, 6 p.m., 1170 Niagara Street, Buffalo, free community performance. And July 12th, Freedom Garden at 6 p.m., 333 Clinton Street, Buffalo, another free community performance. Next article from the Challenger, the other Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech, the Slaveholders' Rebellion. Frederick Douglass's other 4th of July speech, the Slaveholders' Rebellion, was made on July 4th in 1862, where Douglass described the stakes and promise of the Civil War. The formerly enslaved and renowned abolitionist Frederick Douglass offered a famous oration called "What to the Slave is the 4th of July?" In the 1852 speech, he eloquently pointed out the bitter irony of celebrating liberty while simultaneously enslaving millions of black people in the United States. In light of this hypocrisy, Douglass asked, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" But this is not the only speech Douglass gave on the topic of Independence Day. 10 years later, Frederick Douglass delivered his other 4th of July speech. It is called the Slaveholders' Rebellion. Douglass gave his speech on July 4th, 1862, just over a year into the Civil War. What is striking is that many of Douglass's observations, warnings, and predictions remain so relevant today. The context of the speech matters immensely to Douglass's choice of themes. The Emancipation Proclamation had not yet been issued, and while white people and President Abraham Lincoln insisted it was a war mainly to preserve the Union, Douglass, like millions of black people, knew the crux of the war was slavery and its future. All but the willfully blind or the malignantly traitorous know and confess that this whole movement, which now is so largely distracts the country and threatens to ruin the nation, has its root and its sap, its trunk and its branches, and the bloody fruit it bears only from the one source of all abounding abomination, and that is slavery. In his speech, delivered to a crowd of about 2,000 people in rural New York, Douglass called the Civil War the slaveholders' mutiny. In his view, wealthy white plantation owners insisted on the perpetuation of slavery to preserve their power and wealth. This planter class was even willing to send their impoverished white kinsmen off to war in order to preserve slavery as a money-making enterprise. Additionally, in the middle of 1862, the North was widely seen as losing the war, or at least of grossly mismanaging it. In Douglass's view, much of the blame rested with the Union's military leaders. Douglass, saying Union General George B. McClellan, for example, as a pro-slavery white man whose sympathies are with the rebels. Douglass' wide-ranging remarks touched a theme familiar even in present day, the tendency to blame racial conflict on the people fighting against racism. There is, however, one false theory of the origin of the war to which a moment's reply may be properly given here. It is this: the abolitionists, by their insane and unconstitutional attempt to abolish slavery, have brought on the war. When therefore I hear a man denouncing abolitionists on account of the war, I know that I am listening to a man who either does not know what he's talking about or to one who is a traitor in disguise. Defenders of the racial hierarchy frequently attempt to dodge responsibility by alleging that the people raising the cry for racial justice are the source of the trouble. Such persons are penalized for refusing to stay silent about racism. It's like blaming the person who pulls the fire alarm for starting the fire. In another disturbing parallel with the present day, Douglas points out how the defenders of slavery are the archenemies of freedom, the very principle that the 4th of July holiday represents. For this cause, the defenders of slavery hate free society, free schools, free states, and free speech, the freedom asserted in the Declaration of Independence and guaranteed in the Constitution. In this era of defunding diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, of banning books from libraries and schools, of rolling back civil rights and protection in the form of Supreme Court rulings, the continually between the authoritarianism of slaveholders of the 19th century and the far right of the 21st century is plain. Far-right politicians, lawyers, judges, and religious leaders have indicated that learning about the racial history of the United States, even reading speeches such as this one from Frederick Douglass, are anti-American and a threat to their power. They, therefore, seek to control, revise, or limit the distribution of such materials. Douglass realized what is happening in his day and makes clear the collusion of personal who all have the intent of consolidating their power regardless of how their policies affect the masses of the people. While all this was going on, lawyers, priests, and politicians were at work upon national prejudice against the colored man. They raised the cry and put it in the mouth of the ignorant and vulgar and narrow-minded that this is the white man's country, and other cries which readily catch the ear of the crowd. For a powerful segment of the U.S. population, a unified democratic republic form of government could be tolerated as long as they could control it and see that their slaveholding interests were met. As soon as that was not the case, they were willing to destroy the Union to uphold their own power. While the slaveholders could hold the reins of government, they could and did pervert the free principles of the Constitution to slavery and could afford to continue in the Union, but when they saw that they could no longer control the Union as they had done for 60 years before, they appealed to the sword and struck for a government which should forever shut off all light from the Southern conscience and all hope of emancipation from the Southern slave. In a similar manner, the rioters on January 6 of 2021 were willing to violently overthrow a lawful presidential election as soon as the preferred leader did not win. They assembled en masse to assert through physical force that the government properly belonged to people like them, and if millions of voters disagreed, then they would use any means necessary to seize the reins of government. Then, as now, the defenders of liberty, those who call the nation to live up to the ideals it espoused in the Declaration of Independence, have the ability to form a more perfect union. They just need to realize that freedom and equality for black people will mean greater freedom and equality for everybody. Let the loyal army but inscribe upon its banner emancipation and protection to all who will rally under it, and no power could prevent a stampede from slavery, such as the world has not witnessed since the Hebrews crossed the Red Sea. In the Civil War, had Lincoln and other politicians more quickly realized that emancipation was the only path toward victory, the Civil War might have ended much sooner. Douglass, as with many other black people, understood that the Union could marshal the moral force as well as the military force necessary to win the war if they promoted emancipation. What was true in 1862, is also true in 2023. This can be a nation that stands as a beacon of freedom and flourishing if we act on behalf of the most marginalized in our communities. No one is free until everyone is free. Douglass concludes with a sober warning to his listeners. He says that if they try to end the war without ending slavery, then they will have only delayed another conflagration. Instead, if the people of the North wanted to see an end to disunity and bloodshed, they had to commit themselves to fully and immediately abolishing slavery. The question is, shall this stupendous and most outrageous war be finally and forever ended, or shall it be merely suspended for a time and again revived with increased and aggravated fury in the future. Can you afford a repetition of this costly luxury? Do you wish to transmit to your children the calamities and sorrows of today? The way to either class of these results is open to you. Shortly after Douglas's speech, the Slaveholder Rebellion, Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation will go into effect on January 1st of 1863. But event through the Civil War led to the 13th Amendment and the abolition of slavery. The ideology of white supremacy remained. Immediately after the Civil War, white redeemers used violence and political machinations to reinstate white rule in the South and beyond. The lost cause myth became the accepted version of events, and many leaders shrank back from the long necessary work of uplifting black people after centuries of enslavement. Today, Frederick Douglass's analysis and predictions remain salient. Now we too stand at a point in our history where two different results confront us. We can continue to compromise with racism and see the erosion of freedom, or we can decisively confront authoritarianism and insist on a multiracial, inclusive democracy. We, the people, have the power to make the 4th of July either a celebration of liberty or a mockery of it. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Challenger Community News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Just a reminder, content is always available on demand at all major podcast platforms like Apple Music and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Bills announced an opportunity for fans who don't have season tickets to see the new stadium. Although no time has been officially announced, the open practice are planned to take place in the morning. Buffalo will hold the open practice 2 days before they head to Berea, Ohio for a joint practice with the Cleveland Browns. The Buffalo Bills open practice on August 18th and will give fans an opportunity to check out the stadium. It's been reported that the team is not expecting many tickets to be made available since it's the first opportunity for PSL holders to see the stadium and sit in their seats. This will also be the first date that PSL holders get to see the stadium, so everyone will be in the house and with limited tickets. Be sure to visit the link above and take your chances at this limited seat opportunity. Next story, the 2026 Camp Peace Prince, alternative summer camp for youth 8 to 13 years old. This year's focus is democracy in action. Democracy works, but we got to want it, not just during an election year, but all the days in between. President Barack Obama's quote, "Democracy is government of, by, and for the people," President Abraham Lincoln's quote. Here comes the 19th annual Camp Peace Prince. This year, campers and youth who attended previously are planning the camp. The first thing the youth decided was the camp's theme, democracy. With youth planning the camp, that means it's truly democracy in action. Camp of, by, and for the campers and youth mentors. And as always, the first thing on our agenda at camp is the peace agreement. An agreement of how people will behave, an agreement created of, by, and for the camp. Camp Peace Prince, organized and co-founded by the Western New York Peace Center, is an alternative day camp for children ages 8 through 14, centered on justice, leadership development, peaceful conflict resolution, the arts, and the beloved community. It runs July 20th through the 31st, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., except for 2 or 3 slightly longer field trip days. Lincoln Memorial United Methodist Church at 641 Maston at Main and Northland is graciously hosting the camp. There's a gym, a vegetable garden, and a field all at our disposal. The democracy theme means that besides the usual swimming 3 times at Canisius University Pool and the beach, and daily recreation, camp activities will focus on the democracy theme. Speakers include Samantha White, Esquire, and President Lori Robinson, both of the League of Women Voters, Buffalo Niagara, Alex Borns-Miza from NYPIRG, and Joan Simmons, Executive Director of the Niagara Frontier Movement for the Advocacy of African American Human Rights Incorporated. More Challenger community news. The Buffalo Fashion Runway contributes to 514 Memorial Foundation through a $6,000 gift. The 514 Memorial Foundation has dedicated the donation to community engagement and educational initiatives, reinforcing its commitment to listening, learning, and building the living memorial alongside the community it serves. Leaders from Buffalo Fashion Runway recently announced a $6,000 donation to the 514 Memorial Foundation during the foundation's public board meeting, reaffirming their commitment to honoring the lives lost on May 14, 2022, and supporting long-term healing efforts throughout the Buffalo community. Buffalo Fashion Runway is more than happy to contribute these funds to the 514 Memorial Foundation, said Chad Williams, Executive Director of Buffalo Fashion Runway. We believe heavily in its mission and the leadership of Chad Houston to ensure these resources are allocated in a way that preserves the memory of those lost on May 14th while supporting those impacted by the tragedy. This donation was made possible through proceeds generated from the widely successful Black Carpet 3 event held at Shea's Performing Arts Center in February. As the first fashion production in Shea's 100-year history, the event brought together nearly 2,000 attendees, 125 models, 21 designers, and dozens of performers and creatives in a celebration of fashion, culture, and community. At the heart of Black Carpet 3 was the recognition of 10 Buffalo Black icons. The number 10 serves as a tribute to the 10 lives lost on May 14, 2022, while the individuals honored represent the strength, leadership, and excellence that continue to define Buffalo's Black community. This tragedy forever changed our city, said Rondi Chapman, co-founder of Buffalo Fashion Runway. This was an opportunity for us to support healing through the arts and make an impact on the entire Buffalo community who are still dealing with the aftermath of the racist attack. The 514 Memorial Foundation announced that the $6,000 contribution will be specifically earmarked to support community outreach and educational initiatives as they continue to work alongside residents, survivors, and victims' families to shape the development of the 514 Living Memorial and Healing Center. The foundation is currently conducting a series of community listening sessions and planning healing circles, support groups, and public engagement activities designed to support those most directly impacted by the tragedy while ensuring their voices help guide the long-term vision of the 514 Living Memorial and Healing Center. The foundation expressed its gratitude for the contribution and highlighted the importance of community partnerships in advancing its mission. We are incredibly thankful to Buffalo Fashion Runway for their support, said Chad Houston, Executive Director of the 514 Memorial Foundation. These young members of our community are not only doing the work, but making an intentional effort to contribute to other organizations. That's the type of collaboration we need. For more information about the 514 Memorial Foundation and upcoming community engagement opportunities, visit 514memorial.com. To learn more about Buffalo Fashion Runway and its ongoing efforts to support community causes through fashion and creativity, visit buffalofashionrunway.universe. Let's take a look now at some moments in Black history, July 1st, 1889 through July 31st, 1874. July 1st of 1889, Frederick Douglass named minister to Haiti. In July 1st, 1960, Ghana becomes a republic. July 2nd, 1777, Vermont became the first American colony to abolish slavery. It also moved to provide full voting rights for African American males. July 2nd of 1872, inventor E. McCoy received patent number 129,843 for the lubricator for steam engines. July 2nd, 1908, U.S. Supreme Court Thurgood Marshall was born. He became the first African American to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. July 2nd, 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law, preventing employment discrimination due to race, color, sex, religion, or national origin. On July 3, 1950, The Hazel Scott Show premiered on the Dumont Television Network, making Scott the first black woman to have her own television show. July 4, 1827, New York State abolishes slavery. July 4, 1881, Tuskegee Institute was founded in a one-room shanty. 30 adults represented the first class, with Dr. Booker T. Washington as the first teacher. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 8th issue of the Challenger Community News. We read from the Challenger Community News every Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Your reader has been Chuck Stevens. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the Batavia Daily News. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Will Evans, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the latest issues of the Batavia Daily News, serving Genesee, Wyoming, and Orleans counties, on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And our first article carries the headline, Inferno Strikes in Alabama. Blaze triggers 5-county response on Bloomingdale Road. Investigation is continuing into the cause of Tuesday's inferno, which included explosions and generated a smoke plume visible for miles. The blaze was reported at 8:39 p.m. in a storage building at 894 Bloomingdale Road. The flames threatened near